It's a bit late morning, and كل عام وانتم بخير for all the Sudanese here and the non-Sudanese as well, for the marking of the end of the holy month of Ramadan. And I hope that the next Eid will come to us and we are celebrating the end of the suffering of the people of Sudan, inshallah. Of all the subjects that are supposed to be discussed in this panel, it was my misfortune to choose to talk about one that is controversial. That is the US policy towards Sudan, because I know a little bit about it. And I think it's a tough act to follow after Linda and Shannon and Tom Andrews, and talking about a subject as dry and uninteresting as policy is kind of like anticlimax to all that what we heard here. However, I will try to make it as interesting as possible. The U.S. policy towards Sudan was fraught with a lot of flaws, very few successes, distant and far between all the mess that had been taking place between the recent two administrations, that is the administration of President Bush and President Obama. The policies during the Bush time started as a policy of non-engagement because Sudan wasn't that much important until, as Tom Andrews had said, the evangelical community pushed very hard for President Bush to get involved in Sudan, to stop the war, and hopefully to be able to broker a peace deal that will end the suffering of the people of the South mainly, and that was the evangelical advocacy as well as the policy. It wasn't just those guys who are speaking in churches and maybe conservative universities and the conservative talk shows. It was also people in the highest echelons of government at the time, and going down to the middle management levels, and people in business and in different academic settings, and also the grassroots. So when we look at the evangelical community, it is not something that is isolated from the American public. It is interwoven in all the different hierarchies in government and in civil society. They were effective, their voice was loud, and they managed to bring one of their own, if you remember, Senator Danforth at the time, who was retired senator, and he was the first person to broker the peace in the Nuba Mountains, which was supposed to serve as a model for taking care of all the other ailments in Sudan. And then from there, that model was expanded through monitoring a very delicate ceasefire that led to the Mushakas protocols, which later developed to become the CPA. That was a positive engagement. There were so many failures there as well, but the successes were there because of, I think, to my humble opinion, two important things that took place. One, after maybe 20 to 22 years of splitting and fighting within the organization, the SPLA, SPLM came together and became one unified organization, or the biggest part of it, one unified organization under John Grant, who had a vision that he articulated, and he had the charisma to lead that organization and to negotiate that peace agreement. That is one element that is important, because at the end of the day, it is the people that will bring these things to fruition. It is not the politicians or the leverage of other countries or what have you. As important as it is the people who are suffering that can actually, at the end of the day, work to resolve their own issues. That is the number one element to that. And the other one is also the international community came behind the leadership of the United States in what was known at the time as the United States plus the Troika, which was composed largely of the United Kingdom, Italy, Norway, and some other European countries who rallied behind the United States, and they had one voice and one objective, that is to bring peace to Sudan. What happened to that peace afterwards is something else. But the policy worked, and we've seen that the Mashakis protocols turned into the negotiated settlement that we came to know as the CPA, or the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. We might have a lot of criticism to that agreement, and a lot of people called it bilateral agreement, what have you, but it worked at least in making the ceasefire stand, and there was absence of war, which does not mean peace by any stretch of the imagination. Absence of war is not peace. However, the CPA worked and reached some of its logical conclusions, that is mainly the referendum and at the end the secession of South Sudan to become the newest country in the world. So from a policy of non-engagement to a policy of full engagement induced by a broad-based coalition led by the evangelicals that led the United States to work towards negotiating this settlement in Sudan, and it worked. The pressure on the government of Sudan was tremendous, and we've seen throughout history with this government for 22 plus years that the only times that we managed to get anything close to working with this government is when it was under tremendous pressure. Comes Obama in the scene, and the policies moved from kind of like tough talk while he was an activist and a senator, a junior senator in the U.S. Congress, and with a lot of people who are in the current administration that have expressed in more than one occasion and the strongest terms that the genocide in Darfur cannot be tolerated, and if they come to office, they are going to end it, and they are going to help the people of Sudan overcome their crisis. None of that happened, and we are still with the same regime, and the crisis continues. There are a few things that took place. A policy that was maybe in the eyes of some people argued a policy of engagement with the regime, and a policy that in the eyes of other people was weak and couldn't work. However, for me, and I would dare to say that I was one of the people who watched it very, very, very closely. It was the interpretation of the info. General operation, the interpretation of that policy, as weak as it is, that added insult to injury, and that policy never worked, because he interpreted that policy according to his own understanding, and he took the engagement with Khartoum to its farthest point, where it looks like capitulation to the demands of the government of Sudan, rather than engaging the government positively. And part of that was to get the government of Sudan to agree to first hold the referendum without any violence, and also at the end of the day to accept the conclusion of that referendum, which was widely expected to be as it turned out to be at the end, which was calling for the secession of the South. And when that is implemented by July 9th, the South will secede, and we will see, as we have seen already, the birth of the country of South Sudan. So that policy was weak. It was geared towards overlooking the other problems of Sudan and concentrating on the issue of the South. And also it continued in the path of piecemeal deals in Sudan that never worked. Starting with what happened in the DPA during the end of the Bush time, into the peace process that at the end of the day took place in Doha after a lot of haggling and shopping around. Went to Doha and continued for about 2 years and ended up with something that we don't even know how to even define. Some people are talking about a peace agreement, and this is largely the LGM, the organization, the only organization that signed to this of all the other rebel organizations in Darfur. And the government of Sudan, which is calling it a framework, and the international community who were very excited with the PowerPoint presentation that was given to them by the Inuit political representative. It wasn't even the chief negotiator who did this. It's hard for us to define even what came out of Doha. However, we can say that it is another attempt at an agreement that is not going to bring peace to Darfur, and that is not only not bringing peace, but also threatening to further splitting the people of Darfur between those few who will see this as a solution and the majority, as we have seen from a lot of engagement with people on the ground, that will see this as an attempt of the government to stifle the efforts of bringing peace to Darfur one more time. So, with all this, what are we going to do? I will humbly suggest that we change the path. And we have to look at a new engagement with Sudan that is built on 2 pillars. One of those pillars is the responsibility to protect. We have to look at this now seriously, because the responsibility to protect has not become a convention yet within the UN system, but it is widely known today as one of the documents that are very strong and effective if adopted and if implemented in protecting civilians. Because the situation in Sudan, as we see today, is a situation fraught with a lot of violence, and this violence is threatening the livelihood and the lives of millions in the country. Not just in Darfur, not in the South Kordofan area where the violence is a daily practice, but also now in southern Blue Nile that started a couple of days ago, and is only God knows where we go from here, and violence that is going on in the north and in the center and perhaps in the east. So one of the things that we should look at, and the international community should look at seriously, is to try to invoke the R2P, as it is abbreviated and known, and this is the responsibility to protect civilians. The second pillar of this policy that I would recommend is that we have to have an engagement that will lead to political transformation. Other than these 2 things, and we can go in details on how we can do this. Other than these 2 things, the responsibility to protect, that is going to bring a lot of people in the international community to protect the Sudanese people, ironically, from their own government. Like it was called for in Libya, and perhaps it is going to be adopted in Syria. Like people worked and tried to see that the people in Egypt were protected, and fortunately that went on to a conclusion where the regime itself ended, as we've seen, and the people of Egypt were saved. But we've seen the violence in Libya, we've seen the thousands of people that were killed in Libya, and we've seen the robust intervention of NATO and the Security Council of the United Nations and individual countries, and the Arab League for that matter, which is normally is very late coming into this kind of activities. And we've seen also that the African Union is still denies that there is change that is taking place in Libya, and they have not until maybe this morning. I'm not sure if anybody heard anything otherwise, that they will not even recognize the National Transitional Council as the legitimate leaders of the Libyan people and the representatives of the Libyan people as demanded by the Libyan people. So the responsibility to protect the people of Sudan entails that the international community will intervene to protect it from its own ground. And I believe that we've seen glimpses of this. And if we follow this to the end, I think we can make a dent in this violence and try to stop it. And the renewal of the mandate of UNIMIC and the expansion of it, not only to include Chapter 7, but also now to include the protection of civilians across Sudan, not just in Darfur. I think this is a step in the right direction. And if we go in that direction further and include the international community in that protection and try to kick it up a notch in terms of not allowing the government of Sudan to mobilize troops and small projects like the Sentinel project that I'm so proud to be connected to, that is watching over the movement of the government of Sudan and the atrocities that it is committing today. All these things together, tied together, will at the end of the day give us a way of protecting the people of Sudan from this vicious regime. The political transformation, this is one of the most difficult things that could happen. With a government that looks like this, and with also fledgling opposition, that at the end of the day, they are of two minds. On the one hand, they are trying to oppose this government and go against it, and the government will dangle carrots to them, and then they switch and they come back and help the government. So even with this kind of opposition, that is the official political parties that we've grown with and known all our lives, there is a new breed of people in Sudan who are trying to do something different. And these are the grievance of the world and the Harakat al-Taghyir, and those, what some of the people term the Facebook kids. This is a new breed of kids that are there speaking the language of the times. And from generations that are older, and we've seen Sudan doing business as usual. This is a different way of doing business. If we can ask the international community to support these people and to stop the government from clamping down on them and treating them with the kind of violence that we've seen and condemning this kind of violence, I think they can make a difference, because this is a qualitative kind of opposition that we haven't seen in Sudan before, and the tools that they are using and the way they are communicating with each other is essential. And I think if we can work with them and help them, and also connect them to the mainstream, at the end of the day, we need to have this political transformation. So the objective is one. The methods are different. So we can help the political parties the traditional way, find their voice and find their independence of this political party that is buying and selling people as if in the marketplace, and every day trying to take away from the leadership of these parties. If we can encourage them to find their voice, if we can encourage them to have a unified stance against this particular regime and its party, I think that transformation is going to take place. I think a call for elections is going to be, for early elections, is going to be important. Elections that is going to be monitored, elections that is overseen by the international community, not rubber stamped by the likes of Carter Center and what Tom Andres was talking about before, telling them that yes, this is a democratically run elections. That was a sham that happened before. I think we need elections that are transparent and democratic and representative of all the people of Sudan. If that can take place, then we will have that transformation. I suggest also at the end, we can have a few recommendations to make this work. I think without a lot of pressure and using every iota of leverage that the international community has over the government of Sudan, it is not going to work. We have to use our financial sanctions. We have to stop the government of Sudan from getting arms. I think an arms embargo is very important. Maybe we have to start by protecting a few parts in Sudan. Like say, we work on protecting the people of Darfur, protecting the Nuba Mountains, protecting the Southern Blue Nile. And while we are doing that, and protecting these small parts, at the end of the day, we will find that the whole country is becoming different parts of protected areas that will constitute the whole country. And also, we have to work on cross-border emergency aid. Because now we've seen that in Darfur, we have seen a lot of places where there is no aid. Food is used as a weapon in the Nuba Mountains, and in a very short period, we might see that also the Southern Blue Nile will be subject to all this. There is a tool that we haven't used much, and maybe because of the reluctance of the United States to sign up to the ICC. It doesn't have to be a member of the ICC, but it can reach up its support to the ICC, and we see more indictments that are happening, and we see that the European Union, as well as the United States, talking to their friends in the area not to allow the likes of Bashir and Ahmed Harun and others to use their airspace to travel elsewhere, and also to work robustly with other countries on apprehension and detention of these indicted criminals. So if we can do that, these look like very difficult tasks, insurmountable work that needs the collaboration of many people. Of course, I just mentioned so many moving parts of this policy. But let us remember, it is the people of Sudan at the end of the day who can do this. Let us be engaged. Let us talk to our representatives. So many of you in the United States, you can get engaged with the organizations that are doing this advocacy. You can get engaged with your local government. You can get engaged with the central government and with all the government in Washington, D.C. Work with your congressmen, work with your senators, work within the academic circles. It is not easy for us to do this. We are not going to change the government sitting here, talking in KEAN University or in other universities or anywhere in the diaspora. The people who are going to change are the people of Sudan inside the country. We can only help. Let us do our part in helping them. Sometimes, every single one of us wake up in the morning and ask themselves, what am I going to do today to help these people? It is frustrating. It is a daunting task. It's a huge undertaking to be able to go out there among all the other things that you are doing in this life, to go there and to support people. Sometimes you are lost. Sometimes you don't know where to start from. Sometimes you don't even know what to do. But make sure that when this happens, talk to the next person. Grab the phone, talk to another Sudanese. Ask these questions. Ask how we can do it together. Talk to your people inside the country. Talk to your mother, talk to your sisters, talk to your brothers back there, and ask them, what are they doing today? So that we can all help each other, and we can all lift this, what is called the coffin of the sea, that we've been talking about it for a long time. This is not an easy thing, but with this frustration, with this lack of direction, let us all remember that the darkest hours of the night are these hours that are before dawn. Good luck.